Hello, and welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? This week, Jennifer and I are having a literary affair with each other. So today we're going to do our best to sell you on the idea that you should stop sleeping on short stories, because we created an entire podcast / YouTube channel dedicated to these, and it's time we explained why we love them so much and why you should too. So, Jennifer, why did you decide you wanted to dedicate an entire podcast / YouTube channel to analyzing and discussing short stories?
So, Jerry, for me, it was a very simple equation. I love speaking about literature, but I don't have an endless amount of time to do so. So, if I was ever going to have someone else join me on this endeavor, which I have you, and I'm very thankful for that, there was no way I could be like, hey, every week we're going to read a 400-page novel and then we're going to do a show on it. And you're like, no, we're not. And so for me, it was a very easy decision to say, why don't we look at these amazing short stories? They pack all of the punch of a novel in a much shorter time commitment. And I think in the time frame that you and I have been doing this together, we've never picked up a story where we're like, yeah, we can talk about this in like 10 minutes. There's really nothing to say. That literally has never happened. And so I think one of the things that comes up for me, you can have these really deep, nuanced, beautiful conversations on a shorter piece of literature and fulfill what I feel is the most fun thing to do, which is to discuss that with another person. So, Joey, what is something that stands out for you about short stories? Why do you want to talk about short stories on a podcast?
Because I think it's so fascinating when people don't realize how short fiction, I mean, you can do nonfiction, like there's essays, but obviously we primarily do fiction, that people are always like, oh, I didn't even know stories could be that short. Or like, how do you even have a whole story in like 6 pages or 4 pages? And you're like, oh my goodness, if only you knew. And you can know, because we discuss so many stories that are so short. We have discussed flash fiction as well, which could be like a paragraph or, a page or, 2 pages or something. It's really, really short. And you get everything you really need to know in that very short amount of time. So it's a low time commitment, like we always say. And I think, as I often say, is that a really great short story is the mark of a great author, because you have to be so succinct and economical in what you're trying to say and the themes you're trying to portray, that you have to be an excellent writer in order to do that. Otherwise, you're sort of just like wasting time in a short story. I've read short stories that are okay by, I hate to say it, lesser authors, but I think you could tell like who really understands how to finesse a short story and get us, the reader, from A to B and understand what they're trying to communicate to us. So that's why, because I think people are sleeping on it.
So, Jerry, I'm glad that you said that, because one of the things that just occurred to me when you were talking about that, it's like, well, if you read an article like online, or you read something out of Newsweek magazine or Time, or a nonfiction article, it's only a couple of pages. And I think people could walk away from that experience saying, like, I learned about everything I needed to know on this subject in just a couple of pages. And so I'm always curious when we bring up the conversation of like, well, why do people think that short stories don't have enough time to actually become a story that you care about? I am really excited that we have picked stories. We have yet to have a dud, right? From my standpoint, we haven't picked a story that we're like, yeah, this just didn't work. And I think that is a testament to the great authors that have come into our lives to do that. Do you know, once upon a time when we thought we were going to write a short story, we challenged each other. It's like, hey, do you want to write a short story? We'll see how hard this really is. And we both went, yeah, okay, so we're going to just stick right now to reading stories instead of writing stories, because it takes so much. And one of the things we talk about on our channel so much, like any person who's listened to us more than once, if you've listened to us twice, you've heard us talk about this, is that every little detail in a short story is leading you somewhere. And for me, as opposed to a novel where you're just reading, you have hours into this project, like, I don't know if some of these details were necessary for me to understand or experience the novel in full. In a short story, it's for me kind of fun. It's a puzzle. It's like, well, what exactly was the author? Why did they choose the word incredulous instead of angry? Or you just have these words like, that is really curious. And I think that is the thing that sticks out for me in short stories. Is like you can solve for me, the mystery or the riddle of what an author might be trying to tell you, because you don't have to. Joey, I have to go back to Calabasas because it's the opposite of a short story. And you were so excited to read that, and we did read it, and we do have a podcast episode on that. So if you have not heard that one yet, feel free to jump over there and see what we had to say about Calabasas. But it was this very long, beautifully written world building. I'm like, Joey, I don't have time for that. I don't like it. I don't want it. I understand why it's necessary and why people love it. And you can get immersed in fantasy and you can really bond with these characters and see them over a long arc of time. I'm like, could have been a short story. And I can't make it a short story. I don't have the skill to boil that down. But a lot of the themes that we discovered in that longer 400 or 500 page novel, we have had short stories that cover that almost that same territory in 10, 12 pages.
Yeah, I like what you said, where short stories are kind of like puzzles sometimes. Not that they're hard to understand or decode, but the author has so much less space than a book like Calabasas, which was almost 600 pages, I think, to explain things. So some things have to be unexplainable. And I think a great example of that is The Witch by Shirley Jackson, because it's ambiguous. A lot of her stories are ambiguous. It's a great example of she doesn't have time to explain who this guy is on the train or why this story is called The Witch. And you have to fill in the blanks because you have to pay attention and get context from the story itself and lead yourself to your own conclusions using textual evidence, hopefully, to prove what your theory is or what your analysis may be for each story. So, yeah, and there's so many little Easter eggs in all of these kinds of stories where you either have to do the research on your own if you would like to. It would still be a great story on its own without any of that extracurricular activity. But yeah, there are just so many little details that have to go unexplained, are not necessarily hidden, but are so well woven into the story that they feel very natural, but they sort of like stick with you and you're like, wait a minute, why did they say that? What does that mean? And then, it's just fun to discuss that and figure out what each other might have a theory about.
And Joey, thank you for saying that, because we talk about this a lot as well. There's no right way or wrong way to read a story. If you're experiencing the words on the page and you're having a reaction, whatever it is, you've read the story correctly. And the ambiguous nature, I didn't think you would bring up Shirley Jackson's story, but yes, totally agree. I thought you might say something like Hemingway. So he has this dialogue and it's like, wait, there is so much going on in the scene that you are not addressing with the words that these characters are saying to each other, that we've invented this whole psychological landscape, this emotional picture. You and I have different life experiences, so we may see this circumstance very differently, or we may say it exactly the same, like that guy was not good to that girl. Like, we can be very clear, and The Hills Like White Elephants, we were very clear that we had a pretty shared worldview on what was going on. But what I really would love other people to experience is read the story that we've discussed. Feel free to have a completely different idea about what the story is about. We're not experts. We are just experiencing it on our own. And I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy discussing with you, Joey, and with other people. The more you can see how a story connects with your own life experience, how I get to know you by talking about stories, how I get to know myself, how I get to challenge some ideas about why do I believe certain things are true, or why did I make that conclusion. It's just like, for me, it's a really fun, interesting way to spend time looking at beautiful pieces of literature. And we have read things that have made both of us cry. We have definitely read things together that have made us laugh. And we're like, that was ridiculous. Like, I cannot believe that that is how this story unfolded itself. And I think that is just such a rich experience that I'm glad that we are doing it and will continue to do more in 2026.
Yeah, I think short stories are really great for discussion. I have a little family book club that I started. I'll probably pick it back up now that it's getting colder out. And so I just pick short stories because they are easy to read and they really do shed a lot of light on to why you're interpreting something a certain way. And I think we've learned, like you said, a lot about ourselves as readers and as people by discussing these stories because a lot of times we have very similar ideas of what's going on and what the author is trying to do. But because we have such different lived experiences, we can come at stories from an analytical perspective in such different ways that it sheds light on who we are and it helps illuminate other parts of the story that I'd be like, oh my god, I didn't think about that. Like I forget what story we were just talking about, but you're like, what did you? Oh no, it was Lullaby by Leslie Marmon Silko, where you're like, well, what did you think about the relationship between the husband and Aya? And I was like, I didn't. I didn't even think about it. To me, that wasn't like something that stuck out as an important part. I mean, it was important to the story, but I didn't like think deeply about it until you asked, like, what do you think about this? So I think if you do read short stories, give them to a friend, give them to your partner or a family member, somebody that likes to read, and be like, what did you think about this? Because this is what I thought about, this character and their motivations or possible motivations for this, or the symbolism or what this metaphor was supposed to evoke and stuff like that. So they're great. They're great for chatting.
They're great for chatting, Joey. And I love that you said that you do it with your family. And I was just thinking, what's great about a short story? You can say, you don't have to commit to reading a 300-page novel. You don't have to do that with me. That is not a requirement. But if you would just read this 10-page story, it's going to take you 30 minutes or an hour. Then we can have a conversation. I think that also from the other perspective, it would be interesting to have a friend give me a story and say, hey, I would like to talk to you about this story. Like, this is something that's important to me. And I think in the dating world, Joey, some people are in that zone. And it's like, oh, what an interesting way to get to know somebody. It's like a shortcut to what do they notice? What are they interested in? What do they not notice? What do they not agree to? That we, as you will recall, we had an experience with someone who just had such a different experience about reading and what this process of discovery and talking about short stories was, that we found that we couldn't move forward because the way in which we decided to see the world was not compatible with the other person's viewpoint. And I was like, that for me is an important thing to know. And for me, sooner rather than later. And so, Joey, if I were going to invent a new kind of book club, it would be a book club for singles, where you come knowing that you're looking for some people. You do a short story, you're in a group context, you kind of see, how does that person see the world? Is that somebody I'd be interested in meeting? So anyway, that's sort of my dream for the world. Can everyone have a legitimate first or second or third date conversation where you get not small talk, but you can learn a lot about a person by the way in which they talk to you about language and literature. If that's your jam, if you're like, hey, I just want to play basketball with you, it's like, awesome, please go do that. But Jennifer Smith will not be conversing with you during that time.
I'll talk to you when you're done playing basketball. A good idea for a singles book club. I'm sure that would be nice. I would enjoy that. Okay. So why do you think that people overlook short stories so often? Because I feel like anytime I suggest them to someone, even other readers, they're like, pass, hard pass on that. And you're like, but why? Why do you do that?
So,
So
Joey,
why do you
that
think
is
that?
a very good question. And I don't think I'm qualified to answer that, because part of it for me is you have done such a great job. Like, if you're going to suggest a story, I'm going to read it because I trust your judgment. But if I just met you, or I didn't know you, or I didn't like the things that you picked, maybe I would be hesitant. I had breakfast recently with an old time book club friend. I've known this person for 2 decades now. And he's like, oh, do you need some short story recommendations? Like, he is a font of recommendations for short stories. Now, that is atypical, because if you ask me prior to us starting on this project, can you name a handful of short stories that you think would be important for a person to discuss? I'd be like, I'll get back to you on that. right? It's not something that pops up to the top of my head, where there are novels in my mind that I was like, okay, how much time do you have? I'm just going to rattle off the 12 novels that I think every person should read and experience in their lifetime. And so I think there's just a lack of exposure to short stories. And that takes us to something you and I have talked about a lot, both here and offline. Are we in a post-literate society? Do people want to have these experiences? Do you want to gain empathy and understanding and connection with another person that you will never meet? Is that something that appeals to you? And a lot of people are like, no thanks, I'd rather just go watch TikTok, and like, I don't have time for this. I'm like, okay, that's legit. Like, that is a choice. But I always get excited when I can point to a story that will come up in a conversation. Like, a person will be saying, oh, I was just thinking about my mom the other day. And I was like, oh, Ling Ma, you have to read this story. And to be able to interweave that into someone else's experience and kind of broaden based on a topic that they introduced into conversation. It's not always, it's not always us pushing the conversation forward, but being able to slip in a little like, oh, have you ever heard of this story? Then like, no, let's talk.
Yeah, I think that people are a little intimidated by short stories sometimes. Not everyone, and obviously it's not because of the length of story, because they're short stories. It's in the name. But I think people are anticipating it to be kind of highbrow literature when it's not always that way. It doesn't have to be that way. But I think they're expecting it to require them to analyze what they're reading and really sit and contemplate, instead of just like getting lost in a story. Like if you read, I don't know, something behind me, like one of these two big books. Wrong way. One of these two, they're good. I actually haven't read the red one yet, so I don't know, just the orange one. But, you can get lost in the story. I mean, that's like a big book. So you just kind of like get to know the characters, the cast of characters, and the plot line, and any machinations that are going on. And you can kind of just, you're not switching your brain off, but because you're actively reading and paying attention. But it's similar to like when you're watching a movie at that point, because you're paying attention, but you're sort of not, you're not an out of body experience necessarily, but you don't have to pay as close attention. You can kind of just get lost in what's going on. And I think people think short stories are more similar to something like Shakespeare or something, where you're like, what the hell does this mean? What are you trying to say? Why don't you just say it plainly? And for all the reasons we just gave, an author can't really do that. They can't tell you every single meaning of every little thing. Also, a good book shouldn't really do that either. You should be able to read between the lines. And good movies and good TV shows. Like, for whatever reason, I decided I wanted to watch Sopranos from start to finish. And I will say it's it's really well written, and mostly because, well, for lots of reasons, but one of the major reasons that I am always like, wow, that's good writing, is because they don't hold your hand when there are certain conversations. And it's not just like when they're talking about like mafia stuff and they're like, oh, I can't really say it out loud. There is this conversation. I'll use an example from as a good writing, okay, and how this could apply. This is similar to a short story because you're not given enough of the context, really. There's a conversation between Carmela, who is Tony Soprano's wife, obviously, and Artie's wife. I can't remember her name. He's like the restaurant owner that he's friends with. He's outside the mob. Anyway, I don't know.
Charmaine.
Charmaine! Oh my gosh. You are a super fan. Okay.
I'm a super fan. Sopranos is my love language, Joey.
Didn't know that. Didn't know that about you. But anyway, so Carmela and Charmaine are having a conversation after they have a fundraiser, and Charmaine and Artie are catering it. And Carmela's like, oh, I'm so sorry you're poor, basically. And Charmaine says, you know what? Like, I've been with Tony. I've had sex with him. I could have chosen Tony. And so it's a very short conversation, and it's very minimal. And you have to understand the context of what is being said and why Charmaine would even ever bring that up. Because I don't think at that point in the show, I don't think it's brought up anytime after that. At least haven't seen it yet. There's no reason why she would bring that up. And so that's excellent writing to me. And I think that's similar to a short story, is that you're getting a snippet of a conversation, in this case dialogue, and you have to be able to fill in with the context and figure out like why did Charmaine say that to Carmela? Why are these characters saying this to each other? Why is the author including these very specific word choices? That's a very long explanation, but I think it fits.
Joey, I love everything about that because I have had countless conversations about plot lines and snippets of dialogue in The Sopranos with my friends. So for me, it is like
So
a novel. And so
I'm
what,
so shocked that you like The Sopranos.
oh my
But
gosh, I
okay,
just
good.
recently rewatched in the last year all the episodes. So I am in it. I'm in it to win it, Joey. So I am definitely there.
You knew a minor character's name. I didn't
She's
like.
not minor, thank you
I
very
just,
much.
I mean, but compared to like the Soprano family,
Yes.
she's a minor character.
Yes,
But
and you know how I
anyway,
love to misappropriate and misname people even in my own
yeah,
life.
and
But
you
I'm
did.
99% sure that is her name is
It is
Charmaine Marty.
Charmaine. It is.
And the example that you gave, and for people who haven't seen The Sopranos, this is not giving it away, but it felt like that was out of character
Mm-hmm.
for Charmaine to say that. We want to know what was Carmela's. I'm sorry you're poor. I'm so rich. Thanks for helping me with my fundraiser, like that attitude. So there's just all of this nuance, all of this backstory. And those things often come out in short stories. We're like, well, what is that person experiencing? What are they trying to communicate to the person? What wasn't said? What character traits are the authors trying to show us? It's like, do you want to be on this team or do you want to be on this team? Because you can choose how you're showing up for people, and we're just letting you know it's a mirror of what's happening and how that gets received. So I really love that. But Joey, I want to go back to your first point about why people may shy away from short stories. And I love that you said, what experience do you want from reading? For me, I want to get in there. I want to like figure it out. I want to know what the author was up to. I want to see this amazing writing that I can't do and be like, wow, that person really knows how to craft this. But if you do want something that is more flowing, less taxing on your brain, there are tons of short stories that also you don't have to go to level 10 understanding. You can just be like, I like the way they wove color into that story, and I could see the sun setting, and I could taste that martini. And you're like, yes, that was all you needed to know about that story. That was all you personally and that moment wanted to take away from it. And so the choose your own adventure, choose your own level of how you want to approach a story, I think is really important. And I think something you've brought up in the past, which I completely agree with. We are not here to be scholars. We are not giving literary criticism. We're not quoting famous authors who, were critiquing particular pieces of work. We want to have real conversations with real humans about stories that are accessible almost to anyone who would choose to read it. So if you're like, I'm not sure where to start. I don't really feel like my analysis skills in stories is really high. It's like, we'll start wherever you are and just listen in, see what we notice, see if you also want to notice it. You're like, maybe I don't care about those details, but I do care about the music that they mention. Or I do care, about the way that they describe relationships with children and their parents. Like whatever your personal lens is, you can focus on that and still have a really rich conversation. And I think that's what I want to walk away from this conversation, is that short stories really can be for everyone. You don't have to be a scholar who studies these things really deeply. You can also just sort of go along with the story and say, yeah, I enjoyed that. I don't know why, but I did.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to understand this. This is what Jorge Luis Borges would say about poetry, is that it's supposed to evoke emotion and it's supposed to make you feel something. So you don't have to understand it on a cerebral level all the time, especially with poetry. But in this case, we're talking about short stories, that sometimes you don't need to understand every single word. You can just feel something from it, and that's valid. That's a valid experience for short stories. But anyway, to wrap up this conversation, what is one short story that we can, it could be one that we have read or that we have not read, but just one short story in general that you're like, if you don't think you would like short stories, read this one because I think you would really like it.
Joey, I should have had an answer for this one, and I don't have an answer for this one. And the reason I'm going to say I'm going to pause on my answer for this is that I think it also depends on what type of person is asking for a recommendation. So,
But like, if you had to choose your favorite one, yeah,
my
and like
favorite,
this is you're selling it because it's your favorite one.
it literally depends on the day, Joey.
Okay,
Honestly,
today.
I was reviewing all of the stories that we had read for another project, and I was like,
Mm.
"Oh yeah, that was great about this one. Oh, the frolic was amazing. Oh, I love the plot points in The Road Virus Heads North. I liked Thank You, Ma'am. Oh, I just literally, Joey, I went through the whole list. I'm like, there's not a single story that we read that I wouldn't recommend and that I didn't get very deep attachments to the characters and to the conversations we had. So, I'm really bad at picking my favorite story because I'm like, well, I always pick Margaret Atwood because that is like my person. I lean to her. And we did her story called Happy Endings. Is that her best story ever? No, it is not. So I'm not going to recommend that one, but was it memorable for me because it challenged us as readers to say, okay, this is how a person might go about telling a story. And if you don't like this story, we're going to change it up. And I really like the playfulness and the instructiveness of it, but it wasn't, I'm not sure it's for everyone.
That's fair. I think I mean, yeah, you have to sort of cater to what who the person is, if you know them, to be like, well, don't read this one because you're not gonna like it, or you might not like it. But okay, I'm going to challenge myself, and I'm gonna just the one that I think that will have the most appeal. I don't know if it's gonna have the most appeal. I'm gonna say Blood Child by Octavia E. Butler. And okay, that one's a little bit longer, and it takes place in outer space on an alien planet. Okay, and there's aliens in it. But I think the topics and themes that she explores in there are so fascinating that I think there is something in there for everyone. If you like sci-fi and fantasy, you're gonna like the story. If you like talking about women's rights, you're gonna like the story. If you want to see what a life would be like, or a society would be like where men get pregnant, this is gonna be for you, okay? And there's just so many things, and like immigration, and sort of like authoritative governments and stuff like that. So there's something in it for everyone, and it's very approachable, I think, even though it's kind of gory.
So, Joey, I love that you said that because now I'm like, oh, right. I recently, within the last 3 weeks, recommended A
Oh,
Very
that's a
Old
good
Man
one
with
too.
Enormous Wings to someone else because it came up in conversation. And again, you can say, well, is it about politics? Is it about religion? Is it about charity? Is it about
Mm.
kindness? Is it about superstition? Is it about South American culture? Is it about how you would raise a child to have compassion? Like, there's all of these elements in it. But your Octavia Butler story, if you're a person like previous generations of Jennifer who did not understand that she enjoyed sci fi, I'd be like, it's a story about what? Like aliens? Like it's on another planet? No, that's a non starter, right? So I think, as you said, it's very important to know your audience because, like, when I was describing A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings to someone, I said, it's magical realism. It is rooted in South America. This person had a spouse from South America. So I'm like, this is right in your wheelhouse. I was like, but you have to sort of think about angels. There is a religious element. There are some storylines that are going in. If that's really not your thing, this story is not going to work for you. There are some things you can't overlook. So I think
Yeah.
back to our point, you got to know the audience of who you're going to. You need to know the audience that you're recommending the story to, but there are some universal themes that we have found that we just absolutely love. Like we're just always going to talk about these gender dynamics. We're going to talk about fairness and kindness and what it means to be a fully formed human. What does it mean to be a person who participates in society with other people? What does that mean? What is art? How do you live? Those are the stories that I will always gravitate to, even if they take place in our space with people who aren't actually, people.
There are some human beings in that story, though, so there you go. Okay, I those are good recommendations. Gabriel Garcia Marquez with the A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, and Octavia E. Butler with Blood Child. Those are two amazing authors. They contributed a lot to their genres and literature in general. That's a great place to start. Is with these titans of literature. I mean, starting big.
Awesome. Thank you, Joey. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to many more conversations about short stories in the weeks to come. Bye.